I ask you, who is the greater threat to the working class? Evil Republicans or controlled opposition Democrats? Here's another article by Biri and Sondal. Nancy Pelosi lies while the working class dies. Birian is continuing to write for Real Progressives. That seems to be a good match. This article came out on August 4th. In the capitalist system, the working class provides the labor while the capitalist class reaps the benefits. One method the system uses to keep the working class in poverty is student loan debt. Debbie Baker went to college to become a teacher. After graduating in 1999, she had a student loan debt of $35,000. She has faithfully been making payments of $300 a month on her debt for 16 years. She describes her current situation. Almost 20 years after my college graduation and 16 years of on-time payments, I now owe over $81,000. It is unbelievable to me that no one at the federal level wants to help people like me. And I've been a college teacher since before then, since 1994, and I can tell you lots of stories from my students that are similar to this one. She is just one of over 45 million citizens who have student loan debt. The total amount of student loan debt is currently over $1.7 trillion. According to the latest survey of consumer finances in 2019, about 22% of families owed student loan debt in 2019, similar to the fraction in 2016. Median balances among families owing such debt rose 10% between 2016 and 2019 to more than $22,000. Families with student debt had lower average income and net worth, excluding student debt, than the population. This debt is not spread equally throughout the population. As is typical in a racial capitalist system, minorities are the hardest hit by student loan debt. Black and African American college graduates owe an average of $25,000 more in student loan debt than white college graduates. $25,000 more. 23% of blacks are behind on their student loan payments as compared to only 6% of whites. Forgiving student loan debt would not only decrease overall economic inequality, it would also help close the racial wealth gap. I've been saying things like this for a long time. For a Democratic Party claiming to care about these issues, Black Lives Matter, right? Student loan debt forgiveness should be a priority. However, in a recent statement, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi expressed her concerns with forgiving student loan debt. Here's a tweet by Michael Stratford. Speaker Pelosi says Biden does not have the power to cancel student loan debt, as some Democrats led by Senator Schumer are urging him to do. That has to be an act of Congress, Pelosi says.
People think that the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress. And I don't even like to call it forgiveness because that implies a transgression. It's not to be forgiven. Just freeing people from those obligations. So the question of who gets forgiven, to use the term of art that is out there, is a debate. Do we use whatever money there is for the broadest base of support of those with more people with even less debt or fewer people with more debt? That's a policy discussion. But the difference between the president can't do it. So that's not even a discussion. Not everybody realizes that. But the president can only postpone, delay, but not forgive.
Going on with Michael Stratford, Pelosi also questioned the policy wisdom of canceling student loan debt. Suppose your child just decided they, at this time, do not want to go to college, but you're paying taxes to forgive somebody else's obligations. You may not be happy about that. Birian doesn't mention this, but she's just pandering to people's selfishness. All the semantics about the word forgiveness, that's just a smokescreen. Why not just call it what Michael did, canceling student loan debt?
That would be an attitude that people would have. But even take it on top of that, suppose your family was not, your child just decided they want to, at this time, not want to go to college, but you're paying taxes to forgive somebody else's.
Ooh, taxes.
obligations, you may not be happy about that. But you know what? We want all of our kids to reach their fulfillment. To the extent that they want to go to college, we do not want them to be prohibited from doing that for financial reasons. I've had high school students come in here and say with their grades, they're able to be accepted in the Ivy League here and there, but their families' economic situation does not enable that to happen because they have to stay close to home to work, to be part of the family situation. So what we'd like to do is have an economy that is fair, that gives opportunity and does not hold anybody back because of financial reasons. And
what we want is an indentured servitude society that keeps putting gourmet ice cream in your freezer, Nancy. We want kids to go to college so they can pay your pension. As I said in the most recent episode of this show, student loan debt is financing baby boomer pensions. Birian will unpack the garbage about taxes in a minute.
And again, how some people may view the relieving people of this obligation has to be viewed in a fair way, where we have something that gives opportunity. That's the big word, opportunity.
It's so fair now.
America's families. Yeah.
You're paying taxes to forgive someone else's obligations. You might not be happy about that. This is an outright lie. As Warren Mosler explained in his classic 7 Deadly Innocent Frauds of Economic Policy, government spending is not operationally limited or in any way constrained by taxing or borrowing. Federal taxes are not federal income and do not determine how much can be spent on federal programs. All federal programs get new money, never recycled taxes. Taxes do not pay for student loans. Forgiving student loans would not in any way increase the tax burden on citizens. Nancy Pelosi does not even need to go outside of Congress to know this. All she needs to do is talk to the chairman of the House Committee of the Budget, John Yarmuth. As he recently said, we can afford it because we determine how much money is in the system. The federal government is not like any other user of currency, not any local or state government. We issue our own currency, and we can spend enough to meet the needs of the American people. As proof, the Senate Armed Services Committee just approved a $25 billion increase to Biden's proposed military budget. If it passes, this increase would not be tied to taxing. Others in Congress have hit back against Nancy Pelosi's refusal to consider student loan debt forgiveness. Suppose your child did not want to go fight countless and endless shadow wars across the globe at this time, but you're paying taxes to fund all of that. You may not be happy about it. You may have wanted to agree with that one, but the argument made by Rashida Tlaib is invalid and perpetuates the taxpayer myth. Taxes do not pay for the defense budget. The National Defense Authorization Acts that are passed every year are not constrained by pay-fors. We should absolutely cut the military budget, but not because it presents a tax burden. Rather, we should cut the military budget because it represents the single largest threat to world peace in the world. It also is the world's largest polluter, but it has nothing to do with taxes. We've mentioned Stephanie Kelton's work numerous times on this show. This is from May 10th, 2020. Ever notice how people use the expression federally funded to signal approval for certain expenditures, for example, COVID relief, but shift to the expression taxpayer funded when they want to evoke outrage over the way certain dollars are spent, for example, taxpayer funded joyride? The former, federally funded, is always correct. Hashtag MMT, modern monetary theory. Canceling student loans would only have a positive impact. The federal government does not rely on student loans for any revenue, as it has the power to create its own money. In fact, the bulk of student loans will never even be paid. This is from L. Randall Wray. Taxes are not needed to, quote, pay for government spending. Further, the logic is reversed. Government must spend or lend the currency into the economy before taxpayers can pay taxes in the form of the currency. Spend first, tax later is the logical sequence. In addition to her lies about taxes, Nancy Pelosi also claimed the president does not have the power to forgive student loan debt.
People think that the president of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness.
He does.
He does not.
He does.
He can postpone, he can delay, But he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
Well, get on it.
And I don't even like to call it forgiveness because that implies a transgression.
Blah, blah, blah.
It's not.
So she says the president can only postpone, delay, but not forgive. This is another lie. The Higher Education Act of 1965 gives the following power to the Secretary of Education. The Secretary may enforce, pay compromise, waive, or release any right, title, claim, lien, or demand, however acquired, including any equity or any right of redemption. The Biden administration has already used this power to forgive $1.5 billion in student loans, the latest of which was $500 million to students defrauded by ITT Tech. President Trump used an executive order to expedite student loan forgiveness for about 25,000 veterans. A study by Luke Herring of Yale University confirms this power. A secretary committed to student debt cancellation working in an administration with the same commitment could cancel some or all public student debt, which, recall, is 95% of outstanding student debt. So there's a separate point. 95% of outstanding student debt is public student debt. I didn't know that. Nancy Pelosi's statement is in opposition to both the law and the practice. The president absolutely does have the power to forgive student loans. These lies by Pelosi are just a part of a long line of her indifference to the plight of the working class. This is a woman whose net worth is $114.7 million. Her response to the Chauvin verdict was to thank George Floyd for being murdered. Her response to the pandemic was to eat ice cream from her $12,000 freezer, ice cream delivered to her place by essential workers at $12 a pint plus shipping. This was a move so crass, even Donald Trump of the $100 million penthouse was able to make an attack ad based around it.
We turn now to that $350 billion fund to help small businesses and its workers get through the shutdown.
It will be up to Congress to restock it.
But Democrats blocking that move this morning.
They asked for $250 billion in 48 hours. I said, well, I don't think so. They objected, and I congratulate the Senate Democrats.
Speaker Pelosi, what are you going to share with us from your home?
Chocolate candy.
Thousands have been forced to wait for hours at food banks all across the country.
This is
Oh my.
chocolate, and then we have some other chocolate here. We just got to restock the ice cream.
You don't want to eat up everything all at one time.
I can't do it much longer. I'm trying so hard.
Shall we say enjoying?
Having to admit that, yeah, we're starving, and
I like it better than anything else.
Taping this segment, there are 22 million people out of work.
This specific program is about stopping job losses today.
This is hurting people bad.
Other people in our family go for some other flavors, but
Right now, it's survival mode. You don't know where that next something else is going to come from.
I don't know what I would have done if ice cream were not invented. I just wonder.
Nancy continued her lies when the House failed to act on the eviction moratorium on Friday, July 30th. When asked about this failure, Nancy Pelosi claimed, "Really, we only learned about this yesterday," and added, "Not really enough time to socialize it within our caucus to build the consensus necessary." This is another clear lie. The eviction moratorium has been looming large in the minds of U.S. citizens across the country. To claim the Speaker of the House did not know this deadline was coming is ludicrous. Even with the majority in the House, Nancy Pelosi was unable to put together enough votes to pass the bill. And I'll break in here and say, dear viewers and listeners, that's what controlled opposition does. Instead of forcing a vote on it, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer attempted to pass a bill to extend the eviction moratorium by unanimous consent, but it was rejected by the Republicans. I wonder if they knew they would do that. This was a clear strategy so they could blame the Republicans for the failure. As she was leaving for vacation, Nancy Pelosi tweeted, "Ensuring every American has a roof overhead is a value that unites the Democratic Party. That's why I led a relentless campaign to extend the CDC eviction moratorium, knowing that the Republicans were going to turn it down. In an act of pure cruelty, Republicans blocked this measure, leaving children and families out on the streets." If you want to know how Democrats operate generally, that's a perfect example. If the Democratic Party was truly united over ensuring every American has a roof overhead, then they would have had the votes to extend the moratorium without Republicans. Once again, Nancy Pelosi was lying and deflecting the blame. When this tactic failed, Nancy shifted and decided to blame the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. She said, the CDC has the power to extend the eviction moratorium. As they double down on masks, why wouldn't they extend the moratorium in light of Delta variant? This is yet another blatant falsehood. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki stated on July 29, in June, when CDC extended the eviction moratorium until July 31st, the Supreme Court's ruling stated that clear and specific congressional authorization via new legislation would be necessary for the CDC to extend the moratorium past July 31st. Congress had from June 24th, when the CDC extended the moratorium, until now to pass legislation to extend it further. Nancy Pelosi ignored this fact and tried to pass the blame on once again. For the millions who are about to be evicted, Nancy Pelosi's lies will be little consolation as they look for a safe place to stay. In Los Angeles County, California, over 66,000 people were homeless in 2020. Imagine 66,000 people standing together in a group. 66,000 people were homeless in 2020 in Los Angeles County. The Los Angeles City Council just passed a law banning sitting, lying, sleeping, or storing personal property that blocks sidewalks, streets, and bike lanes or near driveways, fire hydrants, schools, daycare centers, libraries, homeless shelters, and parks on September 3rd. Los Angeles will join 34% of cities in the United States that have urban camping bans. A study by Roots Clinic found it would cost the government approximately $12,800 per person, about the cost of one of Nancy Pelosi's freezers, per year to provide permanent supportive housing for the homeless. Rather than criminalizing the homeless, the federal government ought to be providing the funds and the housing to end this crisis. Yet, Nancy Pelosi sent Ilhan Omar's Homes for All Act to committee to die. I want to point out here in passing that Birian mentioned it would cost $12,800 per person to fund this, but we wouldn't be paying for it, at least not from our taxes. Instead of talking about it in dollars, just talk about it in terms of our productivity. If our productivity can provide military budgets that put money in Raytheon's and Halliburton's pockets, certainly we can help the homeless. It would cost, as Birian points out, much less, not only than a freezer, but a cruise missile or something else, drone missile. With this kind of leadership, it is no wonder the Democrats lost House seats in the highest turnout election of all time. The worst part about Pelosi's latest lies is the fact she still remains the Speaker of the House. House progressives had a historic opportunity to block her re-election in January. As the Speaker vote requires an absolute majority of the votes cast, Pelosi required 214 out of 427 votes to win. A total of 218 Democrats and 209 Republicans voted in the election. This means 5 progressives, so-called progressives, withholding their votes would have been enough to block her nomination indefinitely. None of them stood up to the neoliberal establishment. Now she is free to use the bully pulpit of the Speaker position to spread lies about student loan forgiveness. And if you've been following this show, you know we can't emphasize this enough. We talk about AOC and the squad, we talk about Bernie Sanders, we talk about the other so-called Justice Democrats and the so-called progressives. They're all controlled opposition. If it only would have taken 5 votes to get Pelosi to do something, we currently could get her to do a lot of things. But don't use the word we when you're thinking about AOC and the squad, or about Bernie Sanders, or about Ilhan Omar, or about Rashida Tlaib, or about any of these. Any of these controlled opposition assholes. If they can't hold Pelosi's feet to the fire, they can't do shit. Whether or not their contributions come directly from corporations, it should be patently obvious that they're serving the same dollars as everyone else. Why? Because they're serving the same interests as everyone else. And it isn't ours. It's not we the people. Not only does Nancy Pelosi serve her own interests, so does every other member of Congress.